Hi lovelies. Happy Samhain, first of all. I've been having some real technical problems with my videos. I'm still working on it. I'm not a very technical person. And things do tend to go wrong for me with technical things. I'm one of those people who wears a watch and they just stop. So essentially I'm gonna have to put a photo over this video. I'm really sorry about it, and I kind of wish there was another way to do it. I've been working really hard at trying to not have this happen. So like in the video I'll say Samhain's coming up. Obviously today is Samhain. But yeah, I'm not sure I have time to refilm it, and I'm concerned that the same issue might happen again at the moment. So I think this is the best way to go. But if it does bother you, I can try and refilm at another point when I've sorted out what on earth this technical issue is. So much love, and I will see you in a moment in the video coming up. You can listen to it as a podcast, really. Yeah, big apologies. Much love, guys. Hello, lovely witchy folk. So today I wanted to talk about some things that you could do to begin contacting ancestors, and kind of some ideas of ways you can go about that, really. So I'm going to look at both blood and non-blood today, and I wanted to begin with this idea that if you know you have an ancestor who did horrific things, perhaps to you, perhaps are related to someone who's done horrific things to you, or perhaps someone further back, who you don't know personally, but who you do know did some truly awful things in their lifetime. You might be afraid that they're going to come through in contact, and you might find that this prevents you from connecting with blood ancestors. Now, if you don't want to connect with blood, then that's absolutely fine and completely allowed. This is your own practice, and everybody has very different feelings about it, and I'll still be discussing non-blood in this video. However, if you do want to connect, and this is the only thing that's stopping you, then there are a few things to think about. So firstly, you can stipulate you don't want them to come through. You stipulate who you want to come through and ask for loving and healing ancestors. You can focus on moving back down the ancestral line and tracing your path around but not through the dead who are troubled and unpeaceful. You can also stipulate, names that you do not wish to come through. So this doesn't absolutely guarantee you won't encounter any spirits at all who are perhaps in a bad place after death or confused, though it's relatively unlikely in ancestor work, I find. But if it does happen, then especially as a witch, you can ask them to return. Now, people have different ways of opening their energy up and creating this connection, but one method is to picture the ancestor, and I say picture really loosely. Most of the time this will be someone you don't know the face or name of. Our ancestors are really so ancient if we think right back to the beginnings of the human race, and it can be difficult to kind of consider and fully appreciate this, but when we use our intuition, we can kind of see what we feel when we wish to connect to the ancestors. Perhaps we might get a vague outline or just a scent of violet flowers or tobacco or earth. You might find a colour or light or image comes to you, perhaps the rain on the grass or the sound of the wind in the leaves. So whatever comes through, a smell or an image or a silhouette or anything, focus on this. I find it really useful to kind of place this in front of me almost in my mind, so a focal point slightly above and in front of me. And then once you're focused on this, also focus on your intention, which is wishing to contact ancestors who are well in spirit and wishing to have only those come through. Now, you can raise your energy and you can pull it so it's kind of spiraling around you into a cone that reaches towards that focal point, and continue to state your intention. Now, if you don't want to cone your energy or don't feel confident in this, I find that your hands can work really well, and some people find it suits them better. So you create a channel of energy from your palms, tingly fingers, to that focal point instead, almost like a large beam. So you are literally kind of opening this channel. I find it can be helpful to picture it opening, picture this kind of opening when I feel that the energy has built and I'm connecting to this focal point, and to state that I'm opening as well to my ancestors who are well in spirit. So through this connection, you can trace back through or around the ancestors you feel and see, and this may be silhouettes, lines, people, so you trace back to those who are well. Alternatively, you might find that one or more comes forward very strongly and there's no need to trace. However, if you are tracing, the ancestors who are well can actually be a barrier themselves between you and the troubled dead. So following on from this, I have found if you do contact those still troubled, and you might find that, as you progress in this, that it's something which you do purposefully, to aid healing. But if any troubled dead do come through, I have found that sometimes they might appear wounded or fragmented, and they might be a bit gory. Now, I have actually also found that, because spirits are often coming to help us in some way and to teach us lessons, not always at all, but those who we are working with, particularly ancestrally, they may have lessons to teach us. And so I have found it is a possibility that they appear this way to almost teach you a lesson or to test you, to make you go that little bit further in accepting them and kind of, to really see what you're made of in a way. Now, if that terrifies you, I highly doubt that that's going to be a lesson for you. Please don't let that put you off at all. But I wanted to mention it because I do think these kind of things sometimes get a bit passed over. If you're already working with ancestral guides at this point, you can ask for their help if a spirit turns up who is wounded or fragmented. And if not, then guide the spirit back and relook at the boundaries where possible that you have. Ask yourself, in what way were you too open if they've come through? You can firmly speak to a spirit, so I might just say, it's not the right time for you to connect with me or be in my house and space, and you need to leave now. Kind of like you would if someone appeared in your house that you didn't want there, obviously some people may scream, but you would say firmly, you've got to go now, it's not the right time. So if you'd like to, you can also use incense to help them go back, and having the incense there can also help you feel more in control of yourself and the situation as well. So despite the fact that it's pretty unusual that you'd have to use it doing ancestral work, it can still kind of give you that feeling of security. And you can also wear plants, of course, that discourage spirits who still need to heal and encourage positive spirits to come through. Check in with your non-ancestral guides if you have them too. Spirits that you work with regularly in your magic. They can be involved alongside you, and if you have a familiar, they can be involved. You can also ask for aid from a psychopomp. Now, this might be an owl or another animal who acts in this kind of way, or it might perhaps be a god who you work with. If you work with angels, then they might also be involved, and saints as well, of course. So for the ritual, you may choose to use a circle or a compass. Most people would open the ritual as normal by performing this or creating a sacred space and calling spirits that they have relationships with. alongside someone who can open the way for the dead to come forward. You know, so if you would normally perform magic within a compass, then don't feel that you suddenly have to do this outside of it. You can continue as normal in that way. For non-blood ancestors, I would do the same ritual and picture a similar lineage or see a similar lineage. However, for me, the colour and the appearance of the energy differs between them. I do also have ancestors who are not blood related but are kind of mixed into my ancestral blood, if you see what I mean. So it doesn't always differ hugely, but if I'm contacting an ancestor who is not really a familial one in that sense, then the colour and appearance of the energy can differ between them for me. You might see a tree, you know, a spiral, a series of rivers. You might see threads or cobweb strands, literal lines of people or beings as well. It might pop into your head straight away. You know, you might see it now as I'm talking. You might find you see it in ritual, or you may kind of wish to meditate on it for a while before and see what feels natural to you and easy to trace. Sometimes I think that meditating before and kind of allowing that knowledge to come to you beforehand can bring a confidence within the ritual if you're a little bit nervous. Because it might be, you know, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily be nervous about the connection itself. It's more being nervous that that connection won't happen, I think. And so if you've got something that you know and you know is easy to trace, then once you can kind of see it in ritual, it makes a big difference if you already know that symbol and that image. So along this, I would, you know, along with this trace, you can use a rating scale that helps you to decide when you have got to an energy that feels healthy and strong before you ask an ancestor to step forward. Now, for many people, this would simply be gut feeling. Daniel 4, who there's controversy around, nevertheless does describe a rating scale, which I feel can be helpful. But you don't need it, you know. So for him, 1 to 3 refers to troubled ghosts, the dead who are fragmented, lacking in shine, and feel a bit frightening and negative. I find personally that their energy can be quite chaotic. 4 to 6 refers to those who to some would appear intact but are not yet fully connected to the bright ancestors. So he describes this as not yet bright, but I find they're often simply kind of not fully clear and their energy is quite shifting. So it's not as kind of chaotic as 1 to 3, but just simply kind of shifting. And these are what he describes as well-intended or common ghosts. So I find I don't tend to get negative emotion as often. With these, the experience for me feels relatively neutral. And then 7 to dead refers, it's 7 to dead. I'm really on the dead today, aren't I? 7 to 10 refers to the dead who are well. So when I connect to these ancestors, I often get wells of positive emotion. Although if you're not very good at interpreting your emotion, it can be quite, I have personally found, overwhelming. So it may be expressed in kind of different ways, and you might find that actually you cry, but it's still that positive experience. So 4 describes how they have colourful personalities, but they're rooted in love. He also tells us they're strongly connected to other ancestors. Now his suggestion is to hold a boundary with any spirit ranked below a 7 on the scale. As you're a witch, I think this really depends. Well, you might not be. You might be watching this video and not be a witch, but it's quite likely that you are one if you're watching my videos. So if you're a witch, this depends on your own level of spirit work I feel, and how you gel with human spirits, because it's not everyone's bag, to be honest. Like, a lot of people find traumatized humans physically difficult to deal with, let alone spiritually. So yeah, I think it's really a personal choice, to be honest. But you can use these kind of ranking systems for a lot of different spirits who have lived on this earth and then passed over. Yeah, so kind of animals as well, I have known people use it for, certainly. So communication with spirits, for those who are beginning in spirit work, is different for different people, but there are really common threads. So some people visually see them, and for some this is seeing them in the room. For others, this would be more seeing an image of them in their mind's eye. A bit like how some people might see auras, whereas other people get an image of the aura in their mind's eye, but they don't visually see it upon the person, if that makes sense. So some people hear them as though they're speaking in their ear, others might hear a voice within the head, others may get certain words pop into their head but not hear the voice. Some people feel spirits more, so they go cold, they tingle, their hair stand on end, they feel air moving past them. They may feel actual touch or simply a presence or a pull or shift of energies. So be open and aware of how you are being communicated with, and be aware how you communicate best. Use divination. You might wish to use a tool such as a scrying bowl only for ancestral connection, or you might wish to use a tool you're really comfortable with first and that you've used a lot and a lot, so that you know that messages will actually be clearer for you. Contact through dreams is common and a good way of the ancestor demonstrating parts of the craft or giving advice. You may also have signs appear, so a certain word or name being repeated, or perhaps an animal unusual for your area keeps appearing. If you find that you're really struggling, or that there's just not one person that you particularly want to contact, it's worth being open to a larger and longer time scale. So personally, I'd advise not discounting earlier ancestral links and trying, if possible, not to get too strung up on a single person if they don't respond. So there are so many who can bring you information, and you might not know who they are until you try. So if you do feel very called to connect to a single person, do try that, of course, but it's just more helpful if you don't close out other ancestors who you could have really beneficial relationships with. And that is particularly if you're trying to connect with a particular person or group, but after a time there's just still no contact with that person. So you don't have to give up completely. If you still feel that it's a necessary connection, then you don't have to give up, but just keep in mind earlier and wider links as well. So you might wish to create an incense to help your ancestor manifest more clearly. You may wish to have, marshmallow root. You might wish to have some red thread that aids. Some herbs can help ground the spirit or aid in them being able to appear. So if you own a hagstone, they can aid in seeing spirits and otherworldly beings. They are, of course, famous for allowing one to see the fair folk. And for those who don't know what a hagstone is, it's a stone with a hole straight through the middle that you can look through. Now, there may be something else you're given by spirits to aid in you seeing them. Perhaps not stood in the room with you, but in a scrying surface. And this appears in some grimoires. So you may also find that, for example, you go to a shop and you are called to buy a particular scrying stone, or you may find that you're out in nature and you're called to pick something particular up. In the Key of Solomon, there is the fourth pentacle of the sun, I think, which can enable you to see spirits who appear as invisible. You can use mistletoe, which is also becoming more popular at this time of year as we move towards sort of Yule and Christmas. You will be finding mistletoe being sold, especially if you don't have any growing in your area. So you might find it useful to look into astrological timings and when you feel it's best to call them based on when they may find it easiest to appear. So as we're coming up to Samhain, I really wanted to get this video up because, of course, it is a really good time to connect. And although it's kind of an interesting one to think on, whether the veil is truly thinner, whether our own ability to sense spirits is heightened. Obviously, because there's a lot of talk around it, it could be put down to simply that. But I have a wondering about whether or not it's partly to do with the fact that in the summer we tend to be exposed to a lot more light. In the winter we tend to be exposed to a lot more dark, and I often find that dark and kind of dim lights can help heighten my awareness of other senses, and I almost wonder if that is partially it. But anyway, whether or not veil is thinner or not, it can be a very good time to contact them. So there is also the more folky tradition of fern spores being rubbed on you to help you see spirits. I believe it's the male fern spores. There are also balm recipes for anointing your eyes with, but I really do suggest with this, so go and do your own research, because I don't want to give too many exact instructions, because I do think that sometimes it can just be really helpful to actually go away and find things yourself and do that reading yourself, you know, like making that real step yourself. But there are definitely balm recipes out there, but I really suggest being very careful with following the recipes, with knowing the plants that are in there, because some information is really dangerous or frankly just very unhelpful. I have noticed a large amount of beauty products, even with herbs or essential oils in, that can cause real sensitivity to the skin and actually are quite high risk for allergic contact dermatitis. And so if you're going to make these balms, then just do your research really well in proper herbal text first. Avoid the witchcraft books, okay? A lot of witchcraft books give wrong information on herbs. Go to herbals. So online you've got a modern herbal by Maud Grieve. I can post the link in the box. If I forget, remind me. But that can be a good place to begin at least. A book that's very good is the Mills and Bone Essential Herbal Safety, for reliable information on actual safety, risks, side effects, you know, things that may be related. It can be said that a lot of reactions that are supposedly to herbs are actually through contaminated products which don't contain the herbs that they're supposed to contain, or have been cut with something and sold cheaply, particularly online. But so it can be a bit of a toss-up whether or not a herb caused a side effect, but it is important to do that research, because some herbs are simply not discussed properly, really. You have, of course, got the older herbals like Culpeper, but sorry, I'm looking at my herbal books, because I'm studying medical herbalism. But you can, of course, kind of go to your older books like Culpeper, but you do have to realise that a lot of that information is going to be out of date. You know, even things like the soil in those times would have been slightly different to the soil now in many places. You know, the air, the pollution and so on is going to be different. There are a lot of things, plants like us are products of their environment, so remember this, and also remember that science has moved on and understands more that certain reactions can be linked back to plants. So anyway, trying to think if there's another one. Out of the Earth by Simon Mills is another book, hardback book. He was the Mills in Mills and Bone. But yeah, Out of the Earth is a good book for reliable kind of medical information, as well as a bit on side effects, and also kind of like the more sciencey stuff. So I don't personally suggest using ointments with the strong hallucinogenic plants for initial bigger rituals. Wormwood, used safely, could be okay. Do be aware that it can make you incredibly bloated. And that's even through taking it in through smoke and so on. And it can depend on the health of your gut as to how much that happens. So that could be fine. You know, that is a well-used, well-documented plant, which is, I mean, she's a fantastic plant for helping you connect with the dead. But I don't suggest things like mandrake and so on for these initial big rituals, because firstly they can leave you more vulnerable, you know, to other spirits, and you want to make sure that you're connecting with the ancestors, and that they're healthy ancestors who are well enough to guide you, and who they are, who you know, who they, and that they are who they say they are. And you can devise questions. You can ask them for a piece of information. You can ask them to tell you something that will happen tomorrow morning, or, you know, you can devise these questions to check that they are. One thing I would say, which has interestingly come up on a forum that I'm a member of recently, is sexual energy from an ancestor would be unusual and should really make you question. I'd also say that for healthy ancestors, very, very angry and very chaotic energy is definitely worth questioning, and I would not say that you have connected with well ancestors if you're feeling those things. So secondly, I also feel that they're unneeded, because for beginning ancestral work, you want to begin to get used to connecting to those ancestors on a non-altered level, so this connection can be applied more easily and regularly on a daily basis. Whereas if you are used to connecting with them, Magpie, good morning, Mr. Magpie, hello, and how's your wife? So yes, you want to apply it daily, and if you are in an altered state originally, it can be hard to then begin to learn how to apply that when you're not using those plants. So you might wish to begin with smaller rituals or routines, or one larger ritual followed by smaller rituals or routines where possible. One ritual that we do every Samhain, which in our family lasts longer than the day and the night, for us, the festivals they mark a seasonal change, but they also have other meanings, and we use that time to do sort of family rituals that connect our family to the earth and to moving on. And so we use Samhain for different things, and we have different focuses on the different days. So this particular ritual, we call it the dark dinner. So it is another meal ritual, much like the Emily Davison one, but it has differences. So we switch off all the lights and we leave the doors open for the ancestors to enter. We have a candle in the centre of the table. We invite them in and we serve them the dinner, and they are served first. So we then read prayers and talk about the ancestors during the meal, and incense is kind of moving all around us. You know, the food is really dark and delicious. It's beef and black linguine in a balsamic based sauce, blackberry pie in a dark chocolate crust, blackberry and basil wine, and blueberry or black grape cordial. So it's kind of this richness going through. Now, some people would perform this within a Widdershins compass. Others do it clockwise, and that's really up to you and your teachings and your feelings, and depending on how you feel the energy moves best in the compass as it comes up from the earth. So we dedicate the first mouthful of each course to the ancestors for both food and drink. And when I call them at the door, I beat a hand on my chest to a heartbeat rhythm. So some would have an ancestral skull present, some would breathe into it to call them. If you have a photo of the person, you may tap a heartbeat upon the photo or simply speak to it to call them. After the meal's done, I do divination with them, and then the food is moved to the shrine. Now they're encouraged to take as long as they like and stay as long as they please at our shrine. Some people would end the ritual by making it a very clear-cut ending, so we differ in that way. And we find it can be a very interesting experience. It's interesting to see who picks up on when they enter. Yeah, I mean, for us, we don't find that dumb suppers are very... I'm sure some people do them with young children, but my young child is a big chatterbox, and I don't think he would be that comfortable with having to sit silently through dinner. And we don't feel that we need to, in a way. We have times of quiet in the dinner, but it's served, you know, with the main course first and dessert second, so it isn't the traditionally backwards dumb supper. But it is a very similar ritual. So I really hope that you guys have enjoyed this video, and much love and blessings to you. And the hair cord will be coming, I promise. Now I have more time to film. I had better go and do some housework. Much love to all of you and many blessings. Mwah. Bye, lovelies.